Shakespeare, "'Tis the question," and to explore the only question asked of poet Johnson and carried in song by his brother Johnson. Have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers, mothers sighed? That is the question. Have we arrived in the season that we just left, the season that we're currently in, and the season of our forebears? Have we arrived? Name dropping is permitted. What's in a name? Who really cares? Be counted. Names and naming are a challenge. As people of color, we adapt and we persevere using family narratives, collective stories, and the records. Names as a creative art form has its place. Our names can be challenging in our homes and amongst records. Be prepared to abandon all you're taught, told, known understanding. Remember, AAGSNC said that. Often digitized, transcribed records will record inaccurately our names.
The census, working with the census. It falls under representation because usually that's how we were represented, by our names and our families and how we were grouped together. And the census, the question is, did your ancestors participate? The bigger question is, will you participate? When you start with the census, you're going to work backwards. Currently, the most recent census that we have to work on is the 1940 census. The censuses are usually released 72 years after they have been completed. Example, 2020's census will release in 2092. Doesn't matter the political drama that's going on with it, because frankly, most censuses have some type of political drama associated with it. And in some, we are provided great information and others not so great. Alvis mentioned the spelling of our names. That's true. My last name is Addison. I have seen it done so many different ways. There's so many different sources you can go to in order to get to the census. The 1950 census is scheduled to be released April 2022. You will not be able to find a genealogist, trust me. Hopefully it will be the first day or two of April, as in the past it has gone. April 1st, 1930 is when that census, for the 1930 census was passed. April 2nd, so we're looking for the first few days of April 2022 for the 1950 census. But this is areas you will find your ancestors, the family that lived with them, where they lived, what city, what state, and even the street name in some cases, they'll write them on the census paperwork as well. Additional records. This is for locating your ancestors. There's many, many, many records, but when we're talking about representation, you can find that stuff in land records, military records, tax records, and you'll see us bring these things up again. These, again, will come to the location of where your family was, what they were happen to be doing, if they were in the military, what position they had in the military. It even goes as far as the description. And I had Alvis laughing this morning about a description of one of my family members. And resources. I want to stress the B, online resources, where you can find many of these records, which is Ancestry.com, Genealogy.com, Familysearch.org, FindMyPast.com, RootsWeb.com. Familysearch.org, I want to zero in on that because that is a free service and they have tons and tons of records. But on these other ones that I've mentioned, They also offer some of their information for free as well, and you can find some of that information on there. Roots Web, for the most part, is free, at least what I've come across on it. So there's plenty of resources, and again, we'll revisit this. You're on mute, Alvis.
Thank you. Identity. The more you know of your history, the more liberated you are. Maya Angelou, as the writer and civil rights activist, had this correct. The more you know, again, as Felicia said, you would see this: land records, military records, tax records, slave records, give descriptions of who we are, names of who we are, locations of where we were. And if we continue to participate, drop names, leave an account, tell our stories, records will remain for your descendants, for your children, for your grandchildren, for your cousins, for your aunts, for the generations that you will never meet. Among the records, we will find us if we continue to participate.
Vital records: birth, marriage, divorce, death. With this comes happiness, sadness, just array of emotions, but they document who we are, who our family is. But even with that, you have to understand that when it came to us, as far as our identity, even these records may be wrong. You know, there's people that have delayed birth certificates because the birth of people wasn't necessarily, you know, kept up unless it was in a family Bible. Marriage, same thing when it came to us. It may not necessarily be a record you can find, but there was a marriage, there was a pastor, there were two people, they said I do, and their marriage certificate or their marriage, the notification of that marriage may be in another form of a document. And divorce and death as well, especially the farther you get back with your family members. These are all things that identify us. And in the end, these are stories about you. You have not lived once, you have not lived twice, you've lived many, many lives. So these are the records that will document that. And you went too fast on that, but that one's yours, Alvis, please.
No problem. Sorry about that. Trigger
okay.
finger happy. The most important of anything is the informant. I often think of Alice Kravis. Some of you will remember her. She was always informing. She was always telling what was going on and with Samantha and Darren. Always. She would see what she thought she saw. Oftentimes she was right. But when she went back to tell the story to her husband and to run back to look again, the story had changed. The informant is the most important person. Allow some people to be nosy in your lives. Tell the story, share your name, share the histories, share the artifacts that you and yours will call Smithsonian worthy in your home, in your sacred space. It all has its place. Diversity as a challenge. Diversity as a space in this time that we're living in. I am the darker brother, sister, says Langston Hughes, and I too sing America. Simply stated, it was metaphorically. He was acknowledging to everybody that the Black man, the African American, is just that, an American. We have come full circle when it comes to knowing who we are and the records that document who we are.
And with those documents and sources, just listening to Alvis speak, I thought of something else in regard to the informant. In the African American community, we used to call these griots. You know, I have a grandfather that couldn't read or write, but just listening to him talk about, oh my God, I would be so annoyed at the age of like 7 or 8, although it was my destiny to be a genealogist. But oh my God, it was like he would just repeat things over and over. And he would tell me who his mother was, who his father was, who both sets of grandparents were, who his great-grandparents were, who his brothers were, who his sisters were, who their children were. And I grew up, a good chunk of my life was just being that repeated over and over again. So when this, I won't say how old it was when I actually started researching, when I started researching and I started looking at records, those names I could recognize. So it's more, it's so internal, a lot of the things that you are taught, and you don't even realize that that's your family history that's coming over and over again. So you have your home, start at the house. I mean, look in those old closets and basements and attics. Look in those. I know we all have drawers we just stuff things in. Look in that. And if you have a family member that wants you to help them clean up all of that old stuff, get there. You know, I don't know how many dusty records I've gone through and phone books and things like that. You want to look, internet is beautiful, but it doesn't stop or end with the internet. The internet is simply a tool. Historical and genealogical societies, you want to join as many of them in the areas that you're researching. And again, here's more resources. You want to look at magazine articles, newspapers, oral history, DNA tests, do it all. Simply because the more you do, the more your footprint is out there, and the more you'll meet up with people that are on the same journey as you, and you're going to cross paths with these people. This morning, I'm going through emails and old messages, and you find tidbits, and there's so many resources for you. Even as African Americans, a lot of our research, it's not easy. I won't say that. And it can get pretty expensive as well, but it's so worth it. It's so worth it. It is so worth it. You know who you are, you know where you came from, and your ancestors, trust me, they will talk to you. They have woken me up at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, just off of a dream. And I'll get up and I'll boot that laptop up, and Lord and behold, I'll find information that I could have been looking for forever, but it wasn't mine at that time. It was mine that night. They woke me up to tell me about it.
You know, Felicia's absolutely right. The ancestors, they will wake you up. And we're in a season where we are woke, where we are taking back our story. We're telling our story, our family histories, our atrocities, our successes. We are Cajun, we are Creole, we are Native, we are West Indian, literally Africans in America. We are mixed race people. Indeed, we are. And we are telling our stories. All of the resources from family tree programs, online resources, the books that are available, organizations, libraries, and archives house the data, house the ability, house the process for us to be successful at researching and knowing who we are. Ask a genealogist, ask a library. Ask Big Mama for those that still have parents living and grandparents. Ask Nana, ask Grandma, ask Dad, ask Uncle Joe, the one that we keep locked in the closet that we will not allow to come to the family reunion. Ask him the question. All of our branches, most people go from branch to leaf and forget about the stem.
Man.
the nutrients, the part that carries the elixir of life. From the branch, there's not a leaf, there's a stem that connects the leaf. In that stem is a lot of nutrients, a lot of missing data, a lot of information, a lot of connectivity for those that have lost connectivity to the family story, to the place, where do I go next? Reach out, as Felicia said earlier, to genealogy societies, to places like the Hayward Area Historical Society, like the Women of Palma, Ceia. Reach out to the links. Civic organizations, social organizations, I heard earlier in the intro, I'm a part of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. We have histories that are recorded in our sacred spaces and our sacred halls of participation. Document, document, document. Drop names, drop names, drop names. Leave cookie crumbs all over. It's permissible. I know often we don't like people to drop names because we feel that they're infringing and they're setting themselves to a space. But this is a season where I believe personally that we've been shortchanged, where we have not dropped enough of our names. Make sure that the babies, the children, know you beyond your endearment name to your society, your endearment name to your family. Make sure, and specifically speaking to women of today, make sure everyone knows your maiden name, that you were somebody before you married Mr. So-and-so and had the children. Yes. That you were somebody. And if you've been gifted to be in love more than one time, share all of your names so that the record will not, and children born to these unions will not think that your name was the last husband's name and never knew what mama's maiden name really was. And with that, thank you for attending today. This has been a great event. And I would like to share that the African American Genealogical Society is always available to whosoever will come seeking. As Felicia mentioned earlier, and as Eleanor mentioned earlier, I am also a library staffer with the Oakland Family Search Library, and I can always be found there. Visit our website, aagsnc.org, for any of your needs. We are available for you. We meet from 1:30 to 4 p.m. Our website will give you the link information to connect with us live during the season of COVID. We are also on a Zoom platform. Like us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can follow us. We are there. And thank you for hearing us today.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm just, it was a lot of information coming in very fast. I was like, okay, I'm trying to keep track. So there's this and there's that and there's this and there's that. But you did a beautiful job of sort of holding up and acknowledging all the layers, that there are sort of specific breadcrumbs that you need to look for, and thinking about the ways in which in our relationships, in our conversations, and inside our family bubbles, to make sure that we're sharing that history and sharing that knowledge. That's really beautiful. And again, I just feel like I'm ready to go do my research now. I feel like everyone else is ready to start digging and got to dig up those stories.
Ellen, I want to say more than anything, we are, as genealogists, sometimes we forget, and as researchers and as people living in the moment, we forget to record our own story. Gather up all of our breadcrumbs around us to make sure that we're leaving a little bit, to borrow from Hansel and Gretel, the story of the gingerbread. We sometimes forget to make sure that we're imprinting on something that will record who we are while we're grasping to record what's going on for everyone else, and holding things in posterity. We want to make sure that we are held up as well.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I did want to check and see, since we have a little time, if there are people who have specific questions that they wanted to ask about their own, either sort of their own research they're doing or sort of general advice. So I see one from Aggie Briscoe asking, any suggestions then about how to record a personal history? Like, what are some avenues or some containers for that?
Mhm. Well, you can always, and I love the word free, and I love 99, and I don't like the 99-cent store or the dollar store. Just too many people for me, but especially COVID. Great deals though, my mother believes in it. But anything free is your best friend. Familysearch.org, I want to just hold them up for a minute. They have some history that many may not subscribe to, but they're trying to make an amends. But they have a platform that is available and robust enough to hold or allow you to begin to create your story if you don't have it readily available to you. There's software, familysearch.org. You can go there, you can input a name, you can begin to develop your story there. It's in a private space. The software, the technology is owned by the LDS Church, but the platform is yours and yours exclusively. It's not shared with anyone but you. And with that being said, there's software that is available. You can use Roots Magic and independent software. And I used Roots Magic for a reason, because it also operates on an Apple or Mac platform. And I know some of you may be engaged outside of Microsoft and outside of a Windows environment. But you are able to secure your stories there, and that would be a place where you start. I would say start. You can use an online resource like familysearch.org, or you can use a independent source like Roots Magic.
Beautiful. Excellent. Thank you. So yeah, just so that everyone knows, that link to familysearch.org did just get shared in the chat, and we will share it also with a follow-up email to this event, so that you'll have 2 opportunities to receive that. And for our speakers, we have another question, which is, when all family members have passed on already, mother, father, grandparents, how in that situation do you proceed to go ahead and try and research your history if you don't have those primary informants anymore?
You follow the family. You want to answer that, Felicia?
Well, yeah, I can start on that.
Okay.
Both of my parents are deceased, and they were gone when I started it. They left me enough information. At least I knew who my grandparents were, and I know even that is a challenge for a lot of people. If your parents aren't still here, maybe you can look at towards an aunt and an uncle. I mean, my mom's older sister, God bless her soul, she is not one to really speak, because that's another challenge that you have in the African American community. When there's certain things that have happened, they don't want to talk to each other or tell the kids about it, because it was hurtful. It was not necessary. It's what they feel was bad. When, as a genealogist, that doesn't bother me. But so my great aunt, or my aunt, she let me in on things. I had to be a little sly in how I got her to discuss things with me, but it worked, in some cases. Or you have cousins, because you always have to think of this. There's 5 siblings that could grow up in a household. Every last one of them have a totally different story. It doesn't matter. You could have fed those 5 children the same food, put on the same clothes, to the same school. You could give them the identical everything. But by the time you sit down and talk to these 5 different individuals, it's 5 different stories. I mean, and some are extremely different. So you can find out a lot of different things from other people. And say, for instance, you have a small family. And if you have a small family, then at that point, I would say, look at your family friends. I'm sure your mom had a best friend, because maybe your mom didn't tell you something, but she told it to that best friend. Same thing with your dad. He may not have said anything to you, but he told that one long cousin that's 3,000 miles away. So there's many little layers of ways. And Columbo, back to Columbo, he was a detective. You have to dig in areas you wouldn't even think you would have to dig, especially when it's time for you to learn your family history, and be open to it. Just be open to it.
And I want to add to what Felicia just said. In the spirit of the ancestor, I often have ancestral moments for those that have already ascended and have become in the Christian tradition a part of the cloud of witness. If you could center yourself and listen to your inner ear and your inner vision and recreate moments, it may require you of late in this COVID pandemic season, to be specific. I am the first grandchild to my maternal side. My mother's a maternal surname line, and I'm the firstborn child to my mother. I spent a lot of time with my maternal grandmother, and my dwelling place was in the kitchen. I am now at my wonderful age, because my school teachers are here, my elementary and junior high school teachers are here, I will not give my age to protect the innocent. So with that being said, I find myself during COVID going into the kitchen and creating tea cakes. I've never made a tea cake in my life. I've eaten them all. I have used a crock pot to the level beyond the 10th power that I've never done in my life. There's a season where now I and my mother reside together. It has become that time in my life story and journey. And so we're in a shared space, and I'm cooking foods and I'm reminded of the kitchen. I'm having the ancestral memories and moments where I place myself in settings where things come to me. The conversations, the stories are reenacted. And I know you hear often, get in touch with your inner child.
Yes.
Go to a space. Some of us may have to travel back to a space that we said we were never going again, that we would never return home. Mom and daddy left, so why am I going back? Some of us need to journey back to the cemetery. Some of us need to journey back to the old church. If you don't enter, just walk the grounds. Walk the perimeter. Park across the street, roll down your window. Take a picture with your cell phone. Engaging the history, the stories, will give you data, will give you information. And for some of us, the golden nugget and the cookie crumb would be some of the neighbors knew mama, knew daddy, knew grandma, and they still live on the same land across the street, attended the same auxiliaries, the same church. All their relatives are also buried in the same cemetery. Oftentimes, Miss Alice Kravis knows more about what's going on than most people in your immediate family lines of what happened in your home, because she was always engaged with Samantha and Darren.
That's beautiful. It's a really good reminder again to look not just at the family connections, but those community connections too. Like you can look to the church, you can look to the auxiliary, you can look to those other ways, because that's a way to find your ancestors' peers. And they might have different stories, they might have different perspectives than what you would get as a child. Looking in the chat, we have some sort of specific questions related to sort of DNA research. So I have two, which is which DNA service is most helpful in tracing family history, and how close are we to knowing which very specific area of Africa one descends from via DNA? Those felt like related questions to me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, DNA, genetics. Let's talk genetics. DNA is a ooey. You know, to borrow from The Color Purple in this season of Black History Month, Pa, not Pa. Many of us are discovering stories and narratives that were not as communicated, was not as freely shared, either out of the love of the narrative or not so. In any case, the driving mechanism of what DNA test you should choose should be based on the story, the narrative, the conclusion that you're trying to draw, or the hypothesis. Whatever your reason for conceiving a DNA test should be the motivating factor. And with that being said, 23andMe is the only, and I want to make this very, very clear, the only biogenetics company, I said biogenetics, company of all the DNA testing companies. They have scientists that are working day and night. When they came on board, they reached out to the African American community to reach 10,000 people of the experience, to include us in their database. And their sole purpose was to garner DNA data to help fast track cures for health disparities. You have people like Muhammad Ali that came on board. If you know his story, Parkinson's was a part of his genetic traits that were passed down from generation to generation. And he wanted to be a part of their community of DNA holding to make sure that the information in his genetic material was on file so that children beyond his knowing who would come after him would be able to partake in the study that he left in his legacy. So that was one motivating factor for Muhammad Ali to be a part of it. But what was the undercurrent was his race, ethnicity, and culture. It created a database of other people who, with like-mindedness, joined the DNA community, joined the database. And it became more robust as more and more people, the word of mouth, I've heard it through the grapevine scenario, entered into the cortex of the people. Everybody became a part of the database. The scientific, the white paper, and I know the second part B to this question was Africa. With everyone joining the database, you have Africans that were on the ground that participated in 23andMe. You have people that are in America that are first of their families to immigrate to the United States, carrying your genetic material. If you are looking for information on health and ancestry, 23andMe is your best bet. Now, let's talk about Ancestrydna, the latecomer to the DNA platform. They were one of the last to get on board of the big companies. And they are functioning, a high functioning DNA environment. And I say that because their trees and their tree environment, they have trees, they have ancestry trees. And because of their trees, they created a platform that linked their DNA to their trees that made it a force to be reckoned with. And that they already had a platform for their trees where people would go in and create a family tree. You already have the populace of people there. People turned around and bought a DNA test. So now the DNA is connecting with other trees. They have ability to cross over platforms from DNA into trees to allow people to see a stacked version of who their ancestors are, living and deceased. Some people manage DNA of relatives that have since passed on. Be mindful of that. A lot of that information lives over in the Ancestry DNA platform. And with that, they have a DNA family tree that they've created that's completely revolutionary. They take third and higher relatives and connect them to what is called a DNA family tree. So you will gather into your net people that you didn't know about, lines that have been severed, reconnected because a grandchild, a great-grandchild, a fourth cousin or a third cousin's child has taken a DNA test and now made available to you from either platform, 23andMe or Ancestry.DNA. So when everything first started, I saw the writing on the wall. I understood Harriet Tubman when she was saying, steal away home. And people said, no, I'm not going anywhere. Mass is good to me. When I went into civic, social, church organizations, recruiting people to 23andMe, people told me, no, I don't want it. But it has become revolutionary now to our broken links, to our brick walls, to restore family. And so whatever your narrative is, whatever your purpose, know that 23andMe, I hold above all others. And secondary to that now, because of their tree platform, is Ancestry.DNA.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much. It sounds like they both have different strengths. I want to hold up some more sort of comments from the chat. Number one is people are sort of sharing other places that they feel are important. Someone mentioned newspapers. Don't give up on the newspapers. Go ahead and dig through those newspapers. There are nuggets of gold to be found there. Someone seconded your mention of go and visit those cemeteries. Go ahead and like walk the grounds, look at the gravestones. You know, there's information there. Someone mentioned really beautifully the like a loss of a home, the loss of a land can sometimes include losing that family Bible and those links and that data and those stories that are shared there. So that felt important to share. And then
the cemetery, Eleanor, I just want to say that.
Yeah, and the
some
cemetery.
cemeteries were on the land, and some of us will have to go and rediscover that. Not everyone was buried in the colored cemetery. Not everyone was buried in the church cemetery. Not everyone was buried in the segregated cemetery. Some people were buried on the land. Pay attention to your census. Pay attention to the addresses that come up in old census. I recently discovered a death certificate out of Lafayette to some county in Arkansas where you have stamps, where you have Tamo, Arkansas, where there is a Day Cemetery, D-A-Y surname, D-A-Y Cemetery, and it's nowhere to be found on a record of notoriety of listed cemeteries. And I'm thinking, I bet you 100% that was on the land, and they titled it because of the surname of the property owner, and that person is buried on the land.
Well, that's fascinating. Yeah, someone in the chat also mentioned that if you call the cemeteries, they can give you plot numbers by last name. So there's going there, that's helpful. There's also calling. I do have one more question that I want to be able to hold up because I thought it was interesting, because I feel like everyone who's here is here because they're interested in this topic and they're interested in these family stories and these ways to uncover them. And so I have a question that says, it says from someone who is an aspiring genealogist. For those of you who are genealogists, how did you end up there? Like, what was your journey? How did you get your degree, your training? Like, at what point can you say, I am a genealogist? That was the question.
It's called tried by fire. It's called tried by fire. Well, I returned from my undergraduate school in Atlanta to find my family in Alameda County going to hell in the proverbial handbasket. And I made a decision to take on the challenge of being the patchwork quilt, to be the thread, the nucleus that brought everybody back together. I made a commitment, and by me making that declaration, the ancestors joined me. The elders who were living joined me because they understood that there was a disconnect. There was no one was talking, no one was sharing. Cousins did not know cousins. Cousins were finding themselves in civil situations, not knowing that they were blood related. There was a breakdown. Cousins were finding that Pa was also Pa to the other cousin's child, and so forth and so on, because there was no communication. No one was talking about our family story. And I began to be the glue, to be the conduit, to be the thread that patched up everything, to try to bring a dialogue and a knowing and a familiarity back to our family tree. Remember, I'm a first, and it was easy for me to get the attention of the relatives because, and I believe, and strongly I believe this, that I had a seat at the kitchen table. I heard the stories. I knew some stories that no one else knew. My paternal grandmother told me a story, said of, here comes the nigger and the buttermilk. And no, I was asking questions of cousins who were older than me. And if you have stacked generations, you know, some of your cousins are on the extreme and you're the younger cousin. Some of you have that, your first cousins, because mama and, you know, and they had babies early, you know. Back then, 13, 14 years old was not too old to have a child. Not too old to have already been married with your first husband, now deceased. You're working on the second and he gone and now the third. So I have layered cousins. And I was asking some cousins of the story that my paternal grandmother told me, and no one heard of the story. So I shared the story. The story was of her older sister who married the darkest man she could find because she could pass if she chose to. They entered Main Street down in a local town. And as they walked onto Main Street, the crier cried out, "Here comes the nigger and the buttermilk," to acknowledge that this is not a white woman. Do not kill this Black man. Do not kill this white woman because she's not white. She is a colored woman who can pass. My grandmother told me that story of her sister. And I shared it with family, and it got me engaged into not only am I going to mend or try to do my part. If I can just help one, my journey will not have been in vain. That was my primer. That was the thing that galvanized me, and remembering that story and telling as many stories as I could collect through talking with elders.
Okay. Well, I am again so grateful for your time here. I do want to recognize that we're coming up on the end of the hour, and so we can attempt to start wrapping up so that people can finish up and head out.
Do you see the thing from Maggie Briscoe? I just wanted to address that. She said about classes, and I think someone said,
oh yes,
yeah. So there are, right now we're in a COVID environment, you guys, and there are many records available and classes available. Please go to familysearch.org. Please go to aagsnc.org. We have information and data available to you for free classes. There are free classes going on, and there are links that are connected to get you there. When I say a virtual world is real right now, it is unbelievable. If you've ever tried to resource a record and you were unable to get to the voice with the data, call now, right now. And people are picking up the phone on the first ring because it's their justification for still getting a paycheck and not be a part of the unemployment line. People are answering their phones. You're not getting that phone tree that you used to get and you're sent through that, that phone mail hell. People are really answering their phones and being productive to justify the means. Try it now.
Mm-hmm. There was also held up in the chat really a mention of specifically the site African Ancestry, founded by Dr. Gina Page. And is that?
Yeah. African Ancestry is a wonderful tool. I have, of course, taken the DNA test. What it does is connect you on the ground with your regional and your tribal connection of DNA, which is great. Coupled with maps, having maps and knowing the migration pattern of your family, where they ended up, not necessarily the ship or the enslaved person that came off of the ship. But with that and African Ancestry and 23andMe and Ancestry, they are linking you to people that have shared African DNA with you. Those are your 7 and 8 centimorgan relatives that you will have. For some of us that are senior or statesmen or stateswomen in age, it will be your 4ths and 5ths that are your cousin relationships that are giving you the connectivity to that African DNA, that raw, unencumbered, non-African American DNA.
Awesome. Excellent. Wow. Again, I feel like we've just had so much information coming in. I really, really appreciate the questions that are coming up in the chat. There's some very sincere engagement happening there. I feel like everyone on this screen, on this call already is an expert. I feel like you guys know, like there's a lot of knowledge that's being brought into the room with you at the same time that we're here and really sort of receiving and appreciating the knowledge and expertise that you have to share. So I want to say again that we are going to send a follow-up email that has all of the links that are shared in the chat, that this presentation will be available on the Hayward Area Historical Society website, and that link will the link to that will also be in the follow-up, and that there will be an opportunity to donate. But I would love just to take a minute of appreciation to thank our amazing speakers, Alvis Ward and Felicia Addison. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And also, again, to just appreciate our partner organizations, the Women's Ministry of Palma Baptist Church and the Eden Rose chapter of the Links Incorporated. There is a lot of power and a lot of knowledge right here, right now, and I am just very grateful to be in the presence of it. So again, thank you very much. Feel free to get back to me with any questions. Everybody's got my email now because I've nagged you like 3 times with emails to sign up for this.
And thank you to your sponsors.
Excellent. So,
great job. Great hosting job, by the way.
Oh, thanks, you guys.
To everyone into your team. Great job.
So that's it. Go out, go tell your stories, go find those connections.
See you
Carry
soon,
them
everyone.
on.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.